So maybe you can hit us with a couple of the quick points of, how music or how, I guess any kind of music, but especially music that's focused on lyrics, uh,
Hmm.
help students learn a language.
Sure. I mean, as I mentioned earlier, I've been using music before. I think every language teacher, uses music at some point. The greatest thing about it, as far as helping students learn language, that I realized at first was just because it's content that's they're you can bring in, talk about culture, talk about differences, similarities, and people and styles, especially if I was teaching in New York for many years. So when the period I'm talking about, there were students who were really curious about American culture. So, songs were great for that. The limitation was that, sometimes what was in the song wasn't appropriate or was too difficult, or it was infrequent language because the person writing it's not writing it to teach English. So that's when it occurred to me, wait a second, I'm a hip hop DJ. I grew up with this music. My students were super curious about hip hop in New York, especially because it started in New York. And because hip hop is international, as you know very, very well, and everywhere in the world, it's universal. So it's something that could connect the classroom. So, but back to music, not rap for a second again. So, as you said, lyrics, lyrics, it's content, it's language. And the great thing about music with lyrics is, English, because it's rhythm based, because the sound spelling relationships are all over the place. When you see the lyrics while you're listening, and this is great, audiobooks, subtitles, etc. But when you're looking at the words and hearing them, you can make those connections with how the words sound, so that nobody says do like do. They say do, but no, go, so. Like, it's not a problem. They don't have to think about the phonetics because they've heard the word and seen it enough times. But then you get a word like though. If they don't, they may hear that word and see that word, but they're not making the connection. So when they're reading, they might say "do" or something
Yeah.
like that. So the more they're listening to music while they're reading, the less there has to be like, let's talk about phonetics and how these minimal pair, like that stuff can usually is not as interesting as, and goes more slowly than just when it comes naturally. And I've said all of that without even talking about the fact that, rhyme helps you remember language, rhythm helps you remember language. And I can go on. There's so many things. I mean, some is music language? Is language music? There's even that itself. You could go on.
That's true. Yeah, that's
But,
a good point to bring. And when you were talking, it reminded me of a psychological study that was done about people talking to a beat, and like
mhm.
mostly this study was done around like the trance state that people can go into a trance and
Mm.
focused, and
Mhm.
that the beat that the words are spoken to aids this process. And so like you can get yourself into this English trance and like really absorb the words and feel it,
Absolutely. And like, students tell me all the time, I'm not religious myself, but I hear stories about like, learning the Torah or learning the Quran, like like just that idea of reading and chanting. And it's like,
Yeah.
helps you remember. So if you're
Honest.
in a meditative state or in a kind of, I can see how that could even be more intense.
Absolutely.